Namaskar and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to discuss some general principles of research methodology with special reference to the criteria for a good qualitative humanities research. The basic purpose of the present deliberation is not to cover all the aspects of research methodology, but only to provide a guideline to the young researchers as to how should they prosecute and produce something unique in their research works. Humanities research is somewhat different from the other disciplines of research. By humanities research, we generally mean humanistic social sciences and a commonwealth of different subjects that embrace a whole range of disciplines such as arts, literature, Indology, law, commerce, management, humanistic social sciences like economics and cultural geography, cultural anthropology and human geography. So it is not a single subject, it is a combination of various subjects that deal with qualitative research. So we would like to discuss today the qualitative features of humanities research. But before we get into the research main topic of our discussion, I would like to state a few differences between qualitative research and quantitative research. Quantitative research is something where the independent variables affect the dependent variables. It is primarily experimental, involving a sort of a close-ended and structured data. It is numerical and non-empirical, while the qualitative research is totally different, rather totally opposite to it. Qualitative research involves open-ended and unstructured data. It is basically empirical, non-experimental, non-numerical, so the data of qualitative research cannot be quantified. It is basically empirical, that is based on observation and analysis. There is a widespread belief that, I would rather say a misconception, that humanities research cannot be enriched by the principles of research methodology. That is to say, the principles of research methodology are not that applicable to humanities research. That is definitely not true. As I would rather say it is not entirely wrong, and I will also say that it is not entirely right either, because both the parties have their own arguments. For example, the basic features of the humanities research is a typical analysis of historical methods. It is based on historical perspective. So there are four wings of humanities research. As far as the humanities research strategies are concerned, there are basically 4 or 5 wings, though there are lots of other academic theories, methods and viewpoints from which a research can be undertaken, but primarily there are 4. First of all, literary criticism, which has something to do with manuscriptology, that is editing an unpublished text with the help of research methods like genealogical classification of manuscripts. How the researcher eliminates the extraneous elements from a manuscript and finally decides which reading will be the most perfect one and which ones will be the variants, and thus they will come to a situation when the researcher will be able to understand what exactly the original author has written. So this is something relating to manuscript studies, literary criticism. Here criticism means not a critical attitude, but editing. So by literary criticism we would understand the editing of unpublished texts. Secondly, there is a very interesting historical research method or viewpoint that is called speculative elucidation or conceptual elucidation, where a particular concept is studied from the viewpoint of truth or falsehood. Here the researcher finally decides as to the concept that he is talking about or discussing is right or wrong. So in that case, the researcher is somewhat acting like a judge giving a verdict rather than an advocate pleading or cross-examining for his client. So this is called conceptual elucidation. I would give you an example. The Apurusha theory of the Vedas, that is the non-divine, non-human origin of the Vedas, can be studied from conceptual elucidation, and the researcher has to state whether the theory is absolutely perfect or wrong. There is another theory called Synoptic Method, where the study of the concept is also applicable, but there the difference is it has nothing to do with false or truth of the concept. It is a study of the origin and development of the theory, regardless of whether the theory is perfect or imperfect. For example, if I take the same example, the Apurusha theory, that is the non-human origin of the Vedas, the researcher who adopts synoptic method actually tries to investigate into the different aspects that contributed to the development of this theory. So in that, it is different from elucidation or conceptual elucidation. Conceptual elucidation decides whether the theory is right or wrong, and synoptic method decides whether the aspects have really contributed to the development of that concept or theory. These are the three important theories relating to humanities research, but there are quite a few left to be discussed. For example, a historical method, which is perhaps the most popular of all the theories that the humanities researchers usually take or adopt for their research. Here some of the techniques used are case method technique, statistical method technique, and diagnostic technique. Case method technique decides or collects only a simple factor out of a broad population. Suppose a researcher is trying to find out X in Y, or for example, fish in the ocean. So the researcher concentrates only on one aspect of the samples, that is fish. So it is concentrated. That is why it is a case study, where the researcher is concentrating on a single factor out of a big population, for example, ocean. But in the statistical method, the X factor is bigger. For example, if I say that some researcher has undertaken a project called Upama Alankar in Raghubangsham, then it will be a case study because he is considering only one rhetoric, that is Upama. But if he adopts a project like that, the Alankaras in Raghubangsham, So in this case, he is actually taking into consideration so many alankaras, so many rhetorics in that same population, Raghubangsham. So this is called, the second one is called statistical method, where he needs to analyze the data according to statistics method of statistics. But diagnostic technique, there is another one called diagnostic technique, where the researcher tries to diagnose the cause and effect of a study, of a phenomenon rather. If I say that classification of rhetorics in Indian poetics, if someone adopts a research topic like this, then it will be a diagnostic topic, because the researcher tries to diagnose the reason behind the different alankaras being different in nature. Why the alankaras have become different? Whether the alankara is arthalankara, or it is a sabdalankara, or there are so many varieties on which they are different from one another. These are the things that the researcher takes into consideration. So this is called historical method, where there are several techniques that need to be taken into consideration: case study method, statistical method, and a diagnostic method. There are some other points also, there are other methods also. Segmentation method is another interesting method that can be exploited in humanities research. What do we mean by segmentation? By segmentation, we would actually mean that we break a comprehensive concept into core elements according to some specific parameters: demographic segmentation, geographical segmentation, psychographic segmentation, such and such. So the segmentation is being carried out on the basis of some identity of the subjects. So it is called identity segmentation method, and this method is very interesting, and if a modern researcher uses this method in his own research, it will definitely bear some fruit. Another research method or technique that the modern researchers might take into consideration or take into account is the psychocriticism. Psychocriticism means it relates primarily to literature. It is relevant to literature rather than the humanities, social sciences. In this, the researcher tries to find out the inner psychological background of the author while writing a poem. So it is a discovery of the conditions that are latent rather than manifest. So what the authors did not say, but he could not have said this had the author not been of that mentality, is to be studied by the researcher. So it is called psychocriticism. It is one type of literary judgment. Even if the author does not say something which we understand that he should have said, is to be understood through the method of psychocriticism. So these are the 6 of the many humanities research methods that modern researchers will be willing to take into their research. So these are called the wheels of humanities research, wheels. So in this deliberation, we have discussed the 6 wheels of humanities research strategies. There are obviously lots of others left to be discussed, and hopefully I'll be able to upload a few more videos in a short period of time, to be uploaded shortly, where I'll be discussing a few more academic theories, academic research methods and techniques by which the researcher will be able to enrich their research, and hopefully it will definitely take their research to the next level. So thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing. till I upload the next video. Thank you very much.